Hello, I'm Coach Dalton here with Mathicists. We had a short yesterday that got a lot of controversy in the comments. My most controversial post I've ever done so far. And it all began with this equation over here. This equation was number 19 in the no calculator section. And as we all know on the SAT, the no calculator section only has 20 questions. So number 19 is way late in the section. It's the second to last question. So it's supposed to be a hard one. And yet, look at it. It doesn't seem to be that much of a problem. I mean, don't we just add this over here and then divide both sides by 3 and then we're fine? I mean, isn't that all it's going to take here? Now, sure. But here's what I suggested in the short that I posted. I suggested that we always first take a moment and ask ourselves, can I make this equation any prettier? Meaning, maybe I can divide both sides by something to simplify the coefficients. Maybe I can multiply both sides by something to get rid of any fractions, or in this case, decimals. I mean, again, we are in the no calculator section, right? So we don't want to deal with decimals if we don't have to, right? Like, am I wrong with that? So what I suggested we do here is just multiply everything by 10. And that's going to give us 30x minus 6 equals 18. And now we have an equation that's even simpler to deal with. Now, I realize that for those of you who are saying, well, this was simple enough, why are we overcomplicating things by just multiplying whatever? Just boom, add this, divide by 3, done. What's your problem here? Why are we doing this? Now, I want to talk about a disconnect that I think is going on with a lot of SAT preppers out there, especially when it comes to the math section. I'm always hearing this takeaway when students analyze more like just quickly look over their practice tests and to see what went wrong, is they'll tell me, oh, this one was a silly mistake. Oh yeah, over here, this one was a stupid mistake. End of analysis. They just declare half of their errors or more as just silly mistakes. There's nothing to be learned here. There's no way I could have possibly done anything different to have a different result to get this question right. It was just a silly mistake. I just made a silly mistake. What I want to know is, what were you doing that made that silly mistake happen? What I want to know is, what could you do differently to make it less likely to make this silly mistake? Okay? If we just dismiss every wrong answer as a silly mistake, we're not allowing any progress to occur. Now, back to this question over here. Another thing I always hear students say is, oh, I can do that in my head. I can do this in my head. No problem here. No big deal here. I don't need the calculator for this. I don't need to multiply by 10 to both sides. I can do the decimals in my head. I'm so smart. Well, if you're so smart, why aren't you getting an 800 on the math section? If you're so smart, where's that perfect score? Why are you watching SAT math videos on YouTube? So, here's my point. Your brain may be capable of doing math like this in its head, in your head, if this is the only math problem you see today, if it's the only time you're using that part of your brain today, even if it's in one math assignment or one math test at school, your brain can do it in its head. But I want you to indulge me for a moment and just think about what your mental state is on test day, especially when you get to the math section, especially when you're at the end of the math section. You've already been sitting there for over an hour to do the reading section, then over a half hour to do the writing section. Who knows how long you were sitting there waiting for them to get their act together to even pass or out the tests, right? You're all, and in the meantime, you're all freaking out. You're high anxiety. The clock is ticking. Your brain is getting all scrambled by the reading passages. Then you go through almost an entire math section. Your brain's getting all scrambled by figuring out different questions. Do you think that is the same brain at the same capacity that you have just on a average chill day when you're lazily doing some prep or just scrolling through videos? You think those two brains have the same capabilities? Because I don't. And if you're ever confused about why you keep making silly mistakes, I would like to invite you to consider that it might be because you don't have great habits when you move through a math section. And by great habits, I mean taking the time to actually write out your steps, taking the time to actually clean up the numbers, get rid of decimals, get rid of fractions, simplify whatever, so that they're easier to work with. And we continue to write out those steps. And even though I know, don't get me wrong, I know you're so smart. I know you're so smart that you can do all this in your head. But no one's like watching you do the steps, right? Like there's not like a secret part of the scoring where they also look and see how many of the steps you could do in your head. All they care about is you getting the right answer. And if you get the wrong answer because you didn't know how to do the math, or if you get the wrong answer because you knew how to do the math, but were just going so quickly and didn't write out the steps because you're so smart you don't have to, either way, it's the same wrong answer. It's the same result, whether it's a silly mistake or you had no idea how to do the question. I used to really take issue with that phrase, silly mistake, because like I was saying before, it kind of dismisses the mistake. It acts as though we have nothing to learn from what happened. It sort of puts an unnecessary judgment on what happened rather than use it as an opportunity to figure out what to do differently next time. But now I kind of understand that it is silly, and not because of the reason you call it a silly mistake. You call it a silly mistake because it's just, something that happened and no one knows what happened. I call it silly because it was silly of you not to be writing out all of the steps, not to be cleaning up the coefficients, not to be doing your due diligence, for being so blinded by your ego that you would rather win brownie points with no one, with an invisible thing inside your head that gives you a pat on the back when you are able to do math in your head. You care more about those brownie points than you do about the actual points on the test. Is this making any sense over here? So if you're ever somebody who claims they can do math in their head and is resistant to writing steps out, resistant to doing things in a way that's going to set yourself up for success, in a way that's going to lower the chances of getting things wrong, if you are resistant to that stuff and simultaneously mystified by all the silly mistakes that you make and you're just not getting an 800 even though you're so smart? Well, I just hope I've given you something to think about over here. I'm Coach Dalton. You can apply to work with me, CoachDaltonFoster at gmail.com. Check out my subreddit, Mathicist. I'll talk to you later.